Now we are going to look at some intransitive verbs with preposition used as transitive verbs have a passive voice. So some intransitive verbs with preposition like all laughed at her. They are used as transitive verbs and have a passive voice. All laughed at her, passive voice you have. She was laughed at by all. So look at it. Some transitive verbs, some intransitive verbs with prepositions used as transitive verbs. Used as transitive verbs. Have the passive voice. Okay. What are we looking at? We are looking at some intransitive verbs with prepositions used as transitive verbs and they have the passive voice. That's what we are looking at. Now let's look at the sentence I have. All laughed at her. All laughed. All laughed at her. All laughed at her, and that is the active voice. Active voice. Now what are we going to do? Look at it. All laughed at her. Some transitive verb with preposition. We have at preposition. Used as intransitive verbs and they have a passive. Let's look at the passive voice. We're talking about the passive voice. Okay. All laughed at her. She was. We change it in the passive, become she was laughed at. She was laughed at by all. By all. You see that? She was laughed at by all, and that becomes the passive voice. Passive voice. Another sentence. She agreed to my proposal. She. So another one we have is she agreed to my proposal. One. She agreed. Agreed to my proposal. To preposition, okay? To my proposal. And that is the active voice. That is in the active voice, all right? Active. Now we're going to change. There's a preposition here and it is used as transitive verb and it has a passive voice in the passive voice. Now let's look at it. She agreed to the preposition. To my proposal, active one, we're changing it. My proposal was agreed by her. My proposal was agreed. Proposal was agreed. Was agreed to by her. Agreed to by her, and that is the passive voice. That is in the passive voice. Okay. Now that is one. Now let us look at another. Now, the following verbs in the imperative mode. Now I'm going to do a couple of sentences here. Those sentences, the verbs in the imperative mode are changed from the active to the passive. The active to the passive, like active. Shut the doors, active. We are changing it into passive. Let the doors be shut. So mark the verbs in the imperative mode are changed from the active to passive. Shut the doors. Active. Let the doors be shut. It's in the imperative mode. Okay. Now, let us mark how the following verbs, let's mark how the following verbs in the imperative mode are changed. Imperative mode are changed. They are changed from. They are changed from the active to passive. The active to passive. So we are going to look at that. We are going to look at how the following verbs in the imperative mode are changed from active to passive. Let's look at the sentences we have here. For example, shut the doors. So what is the sentence I have here? Shut. Shut the doors. And that is the active voice, and we have to change it now. Shut the doors is what? Active. Now we are going to change that active into passive, and let's look at the sentence. The first sentence again. Let the doors be shut. Be shut. And that is in the passive. So, shut the doors, that is active, and that verb, how we change it? Into the imperative mode by putting it what? As let the doors be shut. Shut the door, active. When it goes into the passive, let the doors be shut, passive. Passive voice. We'll do one more sentence for us to understand this changing of the verb in the imperative mood from active to passive. Let's look at the second sentence I have here. Help the poor, active. Help the poor. Help the poor. Help the poor, that is active. What is it? Help the poor, that is active. Active voice. Now let's change it into the passive. It becomes, let the poor be helped. Let the poor be helped. Let the poor be helped, and that verb helped is in the imperative mood. I changed from active to passive. So, let the poor be helped, that is in the passive voice. All right? Now, let's look at what we have done. First, some transitive verbs with the preposition like at. 2. They're used as transitive verbs and have a passive voice. Example, all laughed at her. Active. She was laughed at by all, passive voice. But there's another sentence here. She agreed to my proposal. Active. My proposal was agreed to by her. Passive. And in this, let's look at how the verbs in the imperative mood are changed from active to passive. Shut the doors. Active. And let the doors be shut. Passive voice. Help the poor. Active. Let the poor be helped. Passive voice. So, we looked at 2 different types, changing from active to passive.